All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, January the 15th, 2025, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIG Lifecycle, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat others as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to welcome new attendees or anyone who's new to the community who would like to introduce themselves. So I will be quiet for a few here, and if you would like to talk, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. All right, I am not seeing any hands going up or people unmuting, so we will move on to our open proposal readouts. So we've got the in-place updates proposal and the node provisioning working group. I don't know, Guillermo or Tilo, perhaps anyone here who would like to comment on either one of those? Don't see any. I don't see either of those people. Yes, Johannes, please.
Yeah, I can substitute Tila, I guess. So regarding the node provisioning proposal, just a quick update that I've started implementing. And by that I mean separating out cloud init and ignition to sort of hopefully reusable packages under the hood. I also started just looking at the API to figure out how complicated it's going to be to add a new CRD for ignition that's going to mirror the existing kubedm config CRD, while hopefully reusing as many of the common fields as possible between the cloud init implementation, which is the current one, and the new ignition one that doesn't exist yet. So yeah, this will require touching the ghost tracks that are part of the API, but I'm hoping that using embedding, we can keep things completely backward compatible and transparent to the user while still allowing us to do good code reuse when creating the new CRD, because I'd really like to avoid copying all the like cluster configuration, join configuration, init configuration to yet another repository. I think it would be a mess. So yeah, this is where we're at. I'm struggling a little bit with API conversions now because I'm not too familiar with that concept. But yeah, this is where things are. And yeah, I know that Matt showed interest in helping me as well. I don't know, Matt, if you've got any chance to look at things so far. I think not, but yeah, if
I've
I'm
looked
wrong,
over
please
all,
correct me.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've looked over your branch and I'm just getting to the point where I'm going to try and do what you've done, which is provision and see if it works. Um,
Amazing.
but
Cool.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
mostly here as a cheerleader so far. You're doing good stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, you're very motivating. And Tilo is going to show up today. He wrote in Slack. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sounds like you're making good progress. And I guess if any of our API experts are out there listening today, or maybe listening to the recording, and you feel up to it, reach out to Johanna on Slack and see if you need some help. So, thank you. Okay, so let's see. We'll get into our regular discussion topics here. I'm going to move this one down into just move it here. I think Mark and Mohammed did this one, but we'll do you a solid and put you at the top of the agenda here. Apologies, Fabrizio and Nolan. So yeah, Marek or Mohammed, did one of you want to talk about the cert manager issue that you put here?
So the cert manager is not up to me. I'm not sure who put this.
Sorry for not raising my hand. I have noticed the set manager 1.15, and there is a security issue there with pen decoding. That's almost 7 score. So to address this, there will be updating the to 16. So it seems minor, but I'm not sure what is the process of that kind of an update? I know it's not strictly related to CAPI, but CAPI runs some tests and looks like COPS spinner tries to provision the instance, and yeah, this I found this in GoMod, and just decided to check it out. So that might be quite an update, right? Because Cert Manager is quite an integration within the cluster.
Yeah, no worries. Did anyone want to respond to Paolo about how we update the cert manager so that we can include that? Christian, please.
Yeah, so basically in copy itself, we refer the version, the semver is in the code to install the newest version. But what you can always do is just install latest cert manager and before installing copy. And with that, copy will not install the old version and will just use the cert manager version you did deploy. So that should be always possible. And yeah, and Stefan linked a request, which is the cert manager bump of the last patch release, I guess.
Thank you.
All right, cool. I guess, Paolo, if you want to maybe follow up in the Slack channel for the specific locations where those versions can be found. All right.
Makes sense. I will.
Oh, and I guess look in the chat too, and I'll put this in the logs. Stefan has posted a link to an example of how we do the bump. Oh, okay. Thank you, Christian.
It's just looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right. Moving on. And it looks like, and I would say, Pavel, follow up in chat here too. There's some good advice people talking about there. Okay, Marek and Mohammed,
Good, thanks.
multi-tenant namespace separation proposal. So please.
So it's just for I'm mentioning the proposal on behalf of Merrick because unfortunately he got an emergency. He will not be able to present it in full details, but he's just proposing that the proposal, as we discussed like months ago, about having multi namespace support in running Gabi deployments in the same cluster. He just created the proposal. He put some initial draft on the proposal goal and use cases. So if just everyone here, if you can give it a review and just look to it, give an input if he miss something. And then I believe next week he gonna make a demo with going through the proposal in details. But yeah, so I'm just saying that in behalf of him. And if you guys wanna give, I can give like a general idea on the proposal is that we trying to having a multiple Kaby deployment running in the same cluster, separated by different namespaces in order to have multi-tenant. And in general, we put a constraint that we are we using the same Kaby version. We are not supporting multiple Kaby versions. So this is just as initial, initial information about the proposal. And please review. And the next week, for sure, we're gonna have more details from Merrick.
Awesome.
You go ahead, Stefania.
Thank you for the summary, Mohammed. Stefan, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, just curious. I mean, I should take a look at the proposal and I will once I get around to it, but I have a long backlog, so this will take some time. So when you're running multiple versions of Cluster API, just in case you can answer, otherwise we'll just deal with it eventually. How are you handling webhooks? Because they are like fairly global, right? You have mutating web configuration, waiting web configuration. You have one of these for all our CRDs. And they are going to refer to one of your copy instances. Especially curious about when you run multiple versions of Cluster API, how are you making sure that basically for the, let's say the right version of the controller handles the right cluster?
Yeah, so I have like a discussion with Merrick about this. So as we are not supporting multiple versions, so like if you are running Kaby 1.8.2, so we running this in the two Kaby deployment. So we are not supporting multiple versions for now.
So okay, so I think I misunderstood you. It sounded like you want to support multiple different versions.
Yeah, it's just supporting running multiple Kabi deployments with the same version in the same cluster. So if the webhook then will not be an issue because it's the same version. So the same webhook is running in the same version. It's just the webhook will handling the first instance run. For example, if you are having your webhook version in namespace Kabi system 1 and another one is the Kabi system 2. So your webhook will be targeting Kabi system 1, for example, the first instance of your deployment that is running under the namespace. So that will be the issue fed, but as a backend, it shouldn't be an issue because it's the same version. So it should be.
Okay, so all the cluster object, let's say we're talking about cluster object, so all of them would basically be sent to the first Kabi instance.
Yeah.
So I assume the sort of configuration that you want to make to the Kabi controller, they are not affecting the controller runtime cache. They are probably only trying to make sure that like the controllers are only reacting to objects in certain namespaces. Because
Yes.
if you would basically strip down the cache to only cache certain namespaces, then you would run into problems here because some of the webhooks are accessing a client in the local cache to look at machine pools and other stuff. And
Yes,
that would give you not found errors. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
like it's the first step to go toward what you are just mentioning, but let's just start with supporting that with same version, and then the next iteration on this work could be how we can handle the webhooks, how we can handle the CRDs, different version of CRDs that might be come in the future work. But let's start with this iteration of this work, and then we can move forward later on.
yeah, I think the multi-version thing is probably I don't know if it's possible, but it definitely sounds sane to me to exclude that part.
Fabrizio, you've got your hand up, please.
Question for my understanding. So what are the advantages that we are seeking with this proposal if we cannot basically shard the memory allocation or the webhook usage?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question again. So what is the advantage of what?
Today I have one controller that watch all namespaces, and let's make the example. It use 4 GB of RAM. Okay. Tomorrow, if I implement the watches, I will have 3 controllers all allocating 4 GB of RAM. And I cannot shard several account because I need all of them to access the object for the webhooks. So what are the advantages that we are seeking? So if you cannot solve the problem if you cannot have a real sharding due to the webhook issue, what advantages are we seeking for?
Well, the main use case that we're trying to solve is the provisioner cluster is as well using Kabi to manage its own machine and workers. At the same time, this provisioner should be able to provision another clusters, like in AWS or in Azure or whatever cloud provider. So we don't want the provisioner Kabi that is manage its own machine and machine pools get affected by the other Kabi that used to provision another clusters. Because if we have a problem with this one, it might cause issues with the provisional cluster. So that's the main use case that we are trying to do here, to separate that. So having a shard here might be optimized based on the number of clusters the provisioner can be created. So we know our limits, how many. Are you talking about increasing the number of custom resources, then the shard become full of memory, or what do you mean by having two? two shard using two controller, each one had 4 gig. Like, why are we gonna reach this situation? That's not clear to me.
Because first of all, I did not have chance to read the proposal. I saw that the PR is from today, so it is just for a couple of hours ago. I kindly ask to, if it is not already there, please make it clear what are the use cases that you are trying to solve. So
Okay.
let's try first to make it clear what problem are we trying to solve before discussing the solution. Second, so let me say, based on some work that we did after 1.9, the majority of the memory allocation of in-cluster API is due to the number of objects that you have in cache. So if you don't do a real cache filtering, and you cannot do it because you need data for the webhooks, that means that you are going, every controller, every instance of copy is going to allocate the entire memory. This is why and second, if I go, I don't see advantage in, so it will be a fake sharding, but it doesn't bring advantage. With regards to, I don't want one cluster. If I have an issue on one cluster, I don't want that this impact others. I think that, let me say, this apply also when you have only one single infrastructure provider. And the solution that, and we are doing, and the solution is that increase the number of workers, make sure that there is no blocking task. So this is why, okay, I'm not opposed. I have to read the proposal. I just want really to understand what problem are we trying to solve, and this and doing namespace filtering is the right solution.
Okay, then let's then check, and maybe I will give more understanding to the shard problem, and then maybe we can iterate on this and the proposal to just make it clear in this aspect.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't read the PR yet, right? So it might be exactly what you wrote there, the use case. But I think it definitely makes sense to say, like, there should be a big emphasis on making exactly clear what we're trying to solve, and just to make sure that we're solving the right thing the right way.
Sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate the feedback. Sure. Thank you, guys.
Richard, you've got your hand up next, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if it's for operational reasons, for example, you want to upgrade a version of Cappy without affecting all of the clusters that it's provisioning. So there's some prior art. So there's companies using vCluster and installing Cappy into vCluster. So you have a bunch of virtual management clusters, and then they operate over those virtual management clusters, and each of those virtual management clusters manages a subset of the clusters. But you can also upgrade Cappy within those virtual clusters as well, separately. So you can split it out that way. So there's definite prior art in that respect, but it's not running the same instance in the same cluster.
Well, thank you, Richard. Vince, you've got your hand up next, please.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize like what I guess Fabrizio mentioned. I also Richard just mentioned that the starting it is definitely something that generally controllers and control runtime and Kubernetes doesn't do well. Like just make that as a statement, as like, you know, for years, like we've seen this. It sounds like the concern, I was skimming through the PRs, like it sounds like the main concern is impact of operational from one cluster to impact the other. And for that, what I would say is that the manager is already wired up and operationally works that way. So no clusters that are being reconciled in any controller should impact other controller. In fact, even if a null pointer exception happens today, and Stefan, with the latest changes, like keep me honest here, that Go routine will not impact other Go routines that are running or will run further. That's done by design. And that is a flag that you can enable in controller runtime to say, hey, don't crash the entire thing. Like if just recover from the panic if this happens, right? It's like if that's a matter of panic. For memory issues, there are other ways to solve that problem. But as Fabrizio mentioned, like we'll have to cache things, right? It's like unless you just want to disable the entire cache and go to the API server all the time, the cache has to be there. So I feel kind of like that, like this will require a lot of changes that then the problem that you're trying to solve might be slightly different solution.
Thanks for all the comments here. And I guess like to, I realize Mark isn't here to talk to some of this. So I guess I was inspired by our discussion from last cluster API meeting. So when I saw this review come up, I jumped on it this morning and was able to read through it. I think there is a little discussion about the motivation to the question that you were asking earlier, Fabrizio. Mark did put some language in there, although I think the user stories give a better example than the actual motivation section. And I left some comments about that. I think a stronger case could be made for like why this is needed and what needs to be done. I would love to see more of the discussion about these technical issues on the PR itself, though, because it sounds like although when I read the enhancement, it makes sense to me like why they would want this, but I wasn't aware of any of these kind of technical issues about the the caches and whatnot of there. So like to me, the enhancement makes sense just on a first read. I think we need some explanation of why it might not be something that why it would be something that we wouldn't want to implement if there are technical issues that are being hidden there. So yeah, like I guess that'll be a good discussion to carry up there. And I see there's been a great discussion in chat about this too. Please, if someone could summarize that in the issue, that would probably be great.
I think it's pretty independent. I mean,
oh, okay.
Let's make sure that if there's something in there that also applies to this proposal, it's fine.
Yeah.
But that was basically mostly around. We currently have an argument called watch filter -- watch filter, and for me that's an example where like, okay, we added a flag, we made someone happy with it. I don't know if anyone still. I mean, I don't know who knows about that thing, but I definitely know that none of the maintainers like know if this thing is implemented correctly everywhere. We don't necessarily know how it's exactly supposed to work and in which place of our code base it actually should be used to make it work correctly, right? So we definitely should not. I mean, that was probably added like a few years before I started working in cluster API, so who knows? But we should just try to not repeat something where like, oh, we have a flag here, it works for some people now, but we don't exactly know what it's supposed to do, and we're adding new stuff. We don't really know if we also have to handle this thing now or not, depending on what we actually try to do with the flag that we added. So that's just let's try to do it properly and see if we can do it properly.
I have a question regarding the Vince comment. Vince, you mentioned that there will be no problem, no crashing in case of panics. So do we actually write this logic with if then recover in case of panic in the code base? I mean, is it something that we write or find as a good practice? This if recovered if panic and then pass to the channel to go further, or did you mean that we have that kind of design? This kind of logic one is kind of inferred.
I can answer if it's okay, Vince. So basically, we took this out of all of your hands. Sort of. So controller runtime had a flag for a very long time, which is called recover panic. That you can set when you set up a controller and or a webhook. You can set it via the builder thing. And it was for a very long time, it was defaulting to false. So per default, whenever some of your code was panicking, the whole binary was crashing. What we did in one or two minor versions control runtime ago is that we changed the default value. So now in webhooks and in controllers, so basically like almost all of our code is in there. If you panic there, controller runtime will recover for you. And what it will do is, it has the usual defer recover thing in there. It will also log something, and it will also increase the metric. So one tip there, it definitely makes sense if you have tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests. At the end of your test, to check the panic metric to see if it's 0. That's so, for example, something that we implemented in core copy, because the nice thing about the panics are recovered is your controller is not crash looping, but it also makes it harder to find your panics, of course. Especially if you want your end-to-end tests to find your panics. So I maybe ping me in Slack, and if that's useful, maybe ping me in Slack, and I can point to how and where we implement this in core cluster API. But yeah, so TLDR is a controller runtime feature, and it's enabled per default. You can also opt out if you want to.
Cool.
Great discussion there. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see what happens next. All right, any other comments or questions on that before we move on to the next topic? All right, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So Fabrizio, you've got a topic about creating a new agenda doc.
Yeah, this, let me see, housekeeping. We have an agenda, yearly agenda doc. It is a new year. We have to create a new one. I just, I'm Vince volunteered to take over this task for me. Thank you, Vince. We are going to do this. But you should not be worried, because we have these cluster API, SIG docs, less agenda redirected that will point to the right one. So just a PSA.
Cool, thank you. And I see Stefan has raised his hand, so please, Stefan.
Yeah, I have a question. Google Docs implemented this nice feature of having document tabs a while ago, which makes it a lot easier to have like basically multiple documents in one document. Just wondering if we should basically just add like one tab per year, and then we're done with this toil and don't have to do it again. I mean, I'm not opposed if you want to rotate the document every year.
I'm okay with both.
That's fine for me. It's just easier to add a few tabs, and that's it.
Let's defer to Vince that took over the task, but whatever is more convenient for Vince.
Joel also has an opinion. Let's see.
Just one thing to bear in mind with the tabs is that they still load, and so the load time of the document would continue to increase if you have multiple tabs over multiple years. So unfortunately, we found this recently that we had to split documents out over years because otherwise it just wasn't loading.
Okay, then let's keep our current pattern and understand. Thanks for that. I think I never did tabs with documents in that size, so I didn't had to notice yet. But it's good to know.
Joel's giving you a preview of your future, Stefan. It is nice to see when we start talking about administrative tasks, and the opinions come out then. Okay, any other questions or comments about that? And thank you, Vince, for volunteering to keep the agenda in order. Okay, not seeing any hands going up, so we will move on to Nolan's topic, propagating annotations and taints through nodes. So please, Nolan.
Sorry, did we skip Fabrizio's topic on?
Oh, I think it got that got pushed indented, so I didn't see it.
Update on the PR backlog.
It is probably a quick one. So thanks, Nolan. So quick one. So last week we chatted a little bit about the PR backlog sort of exploding during Christmas break. We are slowly going down. Just to give a little bit of numbers, we are going down. We are down from 45 to 38. But in the meantime, basically, all about 30 PR were closed and more than 20 created. So yeah, there is a huge turnover, but trend is good. And usual reminder: if you want your PR to get prioritized, reviewed, let me say the best way to help us to get to your PR faster is to help on review or other housekeeping task. I don't know. There are PR created by dependable that are usually very quick and easy to make a first review. Or if you are aware of stale PRs, close them. It will help us to go down. Issue triage is always something that needs help. Answering question in Slack is also stuff that takes our time off of the table. So yeah, let me say, making progress. If someone can jump in and help here and there, it will be appreciated. Thank you.
I have a question here. Sorry for not raising the hand. So you mentioned the stale ones. Don't they close automatically after a certain point of time, like 90 days, I think?
Yeah, but maybe the author of a PR is aware that some PR is, I don't know. I make an example. We just discussed a proposal about the namespace filters, but there are also 2 or 3 PR about the same topic. So
I
maybe
see.
that now, but now we have a proposal. The author can close the PR, so let me say less noise.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you, Pavel. And I think one other thing to add as well, especially for people who might be listening or here and looking for ways to participate more in Cluster API, even if you don't consider yourself an expert, like having an extra set of eyes on these reviews, even if you just say, hey, I looked this code over and I don't know it that well, but it makes sense to me, or I don't understand this, or you've got a spelling error here. Those kind of things are helpful. So even if you're new to this and you're looking for a way to help out, you don't necessarily have to be adding an LGTM and approve on every PR. Sometimes just reading it and leaving your thoughts or maybe a question that came up can be very helpful to the reviewers and the maintainers. So yeah, +1 to what everything Fabrizio was saying. Okay, any other questions or comments about that topic? Alrighty, not seeing any hands going up. So at long last, Nolan, sorry for the false start there. Please.
Yeah, no worries. That was an important topic to talk about because I think it feeds into what I'm going to ask because I think I'm coming with a rather large ask. So there is currently a PR in flight for propagating labels from the machines down to nodes. And this is an extension of some work that Fabrizio and I'm sorry, I forget how to pronounce his name, Uraj, did. Fabrizio did the proposal for propagating metadata through the cluster API objects. What I'm looking to do is to do the same thing for annotations, which I believe is already done through most of the cluster API objects, but we'd like to take that to the node as well. And then the probably larger lift is doing the same thing with taints, which Fabrizio, I saw you had some comments on both of these asking for like complete implementation discussions and things like that. So I guess my main question would be, are these two things, are they off the table entirely just from the get-go, or can we move forward with putting in a proposal to talk about them?
I guess, would anyone like to respond to that? I mean, if you leave it up to me, I say they're not off the table, but Fabrizio, please.
Yeah, I would say nothing is off on the table. So we are open to discuss everything, but I think that your analysis is pretty accurate. So annotation, I think that is not far away from where we are. Taint probably requires some more discussion. Let me say, due to historical reason, probably because most of us basically use kubadmin to set taint, and so we are setting taint basically somewhere else in our API model, and that means we have to figure it out how to move. Let me say how to move forward.
Sure.
My hot take is divide and conquer. So let's try to solve the easiest problem first, which is annotation, and maybe in parallel, let's make something. I also remember Joel bringing up a topic about some limitation with regards to changing taints.
Yeah, they're atomic.
Yeah, they are atomic. So there is also some underlying limitation that should be investigated. So
okay, cool. Yeah, Vince.
One thing to, I guess, just think about is annotation. Like I guess like I don't have much to add there. Like it seems fine for the most part. I will be curious, like though, like if like we will apply some rules there as well, like we do for labels, but we can discuss that later.
Yeah.
On the issue for taints, the interesting part is what happens when the node already has a taint and it's the same, but it might be they disagree on what the node was registered with and what the user wants that at that point in time, which could also come with like some sort of maybe from a security lens it could be problematic. So I'm not saying no, it's just like we just need to think about it, right? It's like, and what is the right way to do it? It's like to error out, right? It's like who is the source of truth? Because usually we suggest folks to use register with the nodes so that when the node comes back up on a restart or whatnot, it will come back up with the same taints. So that's something to think through.
Thanks. Stefan?
Yeah, just some additional comments. So for annotations, I probably have to look at the issue again, but I think I don't know, we just didn't implement it the last time. I don't see why we couldn't or shouldn't, but maybe I'll change that opinion. I don't know. No, but just spontaneously, I don't know. Seems fine. For taints, so maybe just going back to labels for a second. So if I remember correctly, for labels, we initially did something with, I don't know if it was server-side apply or maybe patch helper. But I think eventually we ended up doing some sort of basically managed fields on ourselves. So we are basically tracking like which labels are owned by cluster API. And whenever our opinion on the cluster API level changes, that we would have like less labels, then we say, oh, the only labels that we're going to remove from the node are the ones that we previously set on the node, so that we don't affect anyone else setting labels on a node and only manage our own, basically. That's also the reason why we had like this regex domain, whatever pattern, that we only own certain labels and don't affect others. The interesting part with taints there, I mean, I didn't really think it through, but I mean, labels, annotations, they're maps.
Yeah.
Taints is some sort of array with a struct type in there or something. So probably we need something similar to that. Make sure that we only touch the taints that belong to us. And I think there's also one additional thing, maybe it just falls in the same bucket, but I think cluster API itself cannot be like the whole source of truth for taints, because if I remember correctly, there is at least a taint that the controller manager or something should be able to add when we coordinate a node. Then I think there's also some sort of eviction manager thing somewhere. So I think there are like a bunch of taints that just core Kubernetes sets under certain circumstances, where cluster API shouldn't just come along and say, oh yeah, no, that's the wrong taint, I don't like it. But yeah, I don't see like a showstopper there, just something that we have to be careful about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and the annotations in skimming through the PRs, I didn't do a deep dive, but in terms of annotation propagation, it looks like most of that was handled at the time of labels, and it was basically blanket metadata which included labels and annotations, from what I can tell. But the last step is moving it from the machine to the node, which there's now an open PR for labels, and I think that would be the next step. We would try to do pretty much the same logic for annotations once that merges and we're happy with that. But yeah, this is all good stuff to know about taints, because I figured those were going to be more tricky. So thanks for highlighting some of those issues. Joel?
Yeah, so I was just thinking like some of the problems we're talking about there are if we're continuously reconciling the taints. And then I was trying to work out, well, what do other people do? So think about Kubelet itself has a register with taints flag, right? And that only happens when it first creates the node. Would there be scope here to say, right, taints are immutable on the machine, and we will apply them when we first see the node. Otherwise, do what you want, right? Because we do need to allow people to kind of modify them. Kube control drain would adds a cordon, right? So that adds a taint. Does that work, or does that kind of break the model?
So how generic can it be, the question, right? Taking the labels and annotations would be injected.
Stefan?
I don't know if it breaks the model. Yeah, I mean, we were sort of jumping to conclusions that just because we want to live update labels annotations all the time, that we want to do the same for taint. Maybe it's also nice to be able to do it, but I don't know if we actually want to or not. So yeah, we have to decide this. I think in general, there's probably nothing in our machine deployment machines at machine controller that would prohibit us from implementing it in a way that it's immutable on the machine and we don't continuously reconcile it. Basically, only set it on machine creator or something and then keep it always the same. That should be fairly easy. Just want to mention one thing that we did for labels. So I think there's like some sort of optional contract with the Bootstrap provider, where we're basically saying ideally you should set a certain taint via the Bootstrap provider, which is basically something like cluster API uninitialized. And then when we are at the point where we are applying the labels, we're going to remove this uninitialized taint. So a little bit like the CPI taint, where basically at some point CPI does its thing and then it say, oh, I'm ready, I'm going to remove this taint. So of course, we have to make sure that this taint keeps on working, but that's not my point. What I was thinking is basically that we could basically use this taint as like, so sorry, why did we do this for labels? So the idea is basically we want to make sure that no pods are ending up on a node where we weren't able to sync the labels already, so that we don't run into situations where node selectors were evaluated the wrong way just because the labels were not there yet on the node. So if we do the taint thing, I think it would just fall under the same bucket, that we make sure that when we set the labels, we're also going to set annotations. We can also set the taints, and only afterwards we're going to remove this additional uninitialized taint, so that we have some protection until we are able to apply all our stuff on a node. And depending on what we want to do with taints, with continuously reconciling taints, we could basically say, oh, only until the uninitialized taint is there. Sorry, only as long as it's there. We're going to write our taints there, and afterwards we're just done with it.
I guess I have a question. Maybe I'm missing this. I need more coffee, maybe. So if we only do it like once, what's the difference between taints? I mean, what Joel was suggesting. So what's different than that than just passing the flag to kubelet at that point?
I think there is at least like you have one single API for all of cluster API and not just for the Kubernetes Bootstrap provider, right? I mean, you have this one field in a machine object. I don't know if that's a benefit to anyone or not. I'm saying that's a difference that we don't have today. Because today it's in the Kubernetes config template, whatever Bootstrap and control plane provider you're using.
So I guess the benefit would be that the controller would do it, or like the machine controller would do it rather than.
And that's just one random difference that I can think about.
So, like, sorry to interrupt, just to respond to that, we have a use case where we don't use a Bootstrap provider. So in that case, there is no way at the moment. We would have to build a bootstrap provider just to apply taints. So that's also, I don't know how many other people do it without a bootstrap provider, but that would be one reason for us.
But that's fair. That's a completely valid point. But functionally, it would be exactly the same. Like we wouldn't reconcile. That's like if you, I guess, would have to make it like create only machine something thing like that. That's completely fine. I think there's a couple hints, right?
Andrea, you've got your hand up, please.
Thank you. So I just want to mention that this is already a topic for CapD. So I'm posting a link in the chat. And this is where CapD acts as an external cloud provider to manage the taint on the node, and also to set the provider ID, which is also another topic. So I think all this area about taints and labels as well, and propagation and so on, it is going to collide with cloud providers. And with all the infrastructure providers that are currently acting in a similar way, which I did. So I think because in bare metal, for example, you don't have a cloud provider usually, or you have to write your own. So I really welcome all these changes because it makes from the infrastructure provider perspective things easier. But yeah, I just want to point out that maybe there will be some collision with responsibilities, and yeah, I think the one that I linked is one.
Well, thank you, Andrea. I think that makes sense. Stefan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on how we implement it, I mean, we have to make sure that we don't run into conflicts. But I mean, yeah, you have to make sure that there's risks of cloud providers and all of that stuff, but doesn't necessarily have to lead to problems if you do it right. Just on the point of not running with a bootstrap provider. So I think I remember that a lot of machine pool providers are basically, a lot of machine pool implementations are not using a bootstrap config object. I have no clue what they are doing for bootstrap. So maybe that's like another half of cluster API that is at least not using like a regular bootstrap provider. Just one question for the bootstrap provider less thing. So that probably means that you create an image and stuff is just baked into the image, and then you, from a copy point of view, you basically have a static kubelet config where you wouldn't add stuff like register with taints, right? Is that basically what we can or cannot rely on in your scenario? That kubelet will always just have like the same config, and if you want to put different taints on there, it has to come from somewhere else. It cannot come from bootstrap provider, and yeah, that's it basically.
I think that question might have been directed at Joel, but I think we do have I think we do have another controller that manages that stuff. Rachel, the MCO does that, the machine config operator, in our case.
Yeah, sorry, I was responding to someone on Slack. Yeah, so we have a completely separate system that configures kubelet and everything like that. And it's completely detached from the machine API. So like for us, we just have a static ignition file that we pass in as user data to all the machines, and then that points out to a separate endpoint where they go and get their full ignition.
Okay, Fabrizio, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to quick comment on top of the Andrea note. So I think that definitely we should assume that something else is going to change label annotation and taints on nodes. So we are not, let me say, the Capi could not be the owner of those three set of info. Say that, I don't think that CapV is should be used as a code reference. Let me say it is for this.
You mean CapD, right? Not CapV.
CapD.
Just sounded like CapV from here, but
sorry. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not
let
saying
me
that
say
cap V should be used as reference implementation, but maybe
no,
more
no,
than cap D.
yeah, there are bunch of shortcuts in CapD implementation. The biggest one is that we were lazy. We did not implement a fake CPI provider or a simple CPI provider. That, by the way, could have some advantages like removing nodes when a machine exists. So yeah.
Vince, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what Blake said. Like, so Scapity is definitely a special case. But what I'll say is like, ultimately, like for things and labels and annotations, Cappy will own what it will own, and we'll keep track of that like through I can't remember what's it called right now, that field, the managed field or something. One thing that I want to point out is like as I was thinking through more like of the use cases, like there's some weird user experience of making this like startup only. And then it's very inflexible and it would require, for example, like say I want to remove a taint or change the value of a taint or the behavior. It would require the entire rollout of everything, which is probably defeat the purpose a little. Because like if I want to change a thing because I don't know, maybe it's the wrong one, or I want to change the behavior of that thing or whatnot, I probably wanted to do that in place. And then so there's pros and cons to both. Like I just pointed it out like before I forget. But making it like in place upgradable or like propagation in place like of things as well, like sounds better in that context versus rolling it, because that wouldn't be too different from what we have today. And then, it's like, then if we make it immutable, like say like create only, then from the machine template point of view, then it's like, well, what do we do from the machine deployment? Is it create only there as well, which means you have to delete the machine deployment and the machine size, right? It's like it has like other repercussions.
Stefan, you got your hand up.
I think the idea was not necessarily to make it create only on the machine deployment and machine set level, but just on the machine level. But independent of that point, if I remember correctly, looking at the machine template, basically we currently have two categories of fields. You either have a field that can be updated in place that doesn't trigger a rollout. I mean, not a rollout in the sense of machine recreations. It will just propagate down the entire hierarchy as far as necessary. That's one kind of field. And the other kind of field are fields that trigger rollouts. So I don't know where taints would fit in, right? I mean, if you don't want to in-place update them, does it mean that we want to trigger rollout on taint change? Probably it does. But if you somehow would make it fall in between, and that's like an additional technical challenge. Like if it shouldn't trigger a rollout, but it should only probably doesn't make sense. So let's just forget that. But maybe it's helpful to someone. That comment.
Okay, I'm going to I don't know, Nolan, did you actually have a comment or were you just raising for me?
Just raise my hand for me or for you. For me. For you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a comment because A, this is a great discussion. B, I think that the current rules we have for propagating labels are too restrictive. And I completely understand the point Stefan was making about why we might want to restrict them that way. But I think in the future, it would be nice to have a design pattern that allows us to open this up even more. Because
There's a PR up. There's a PR.
Is there
Yeah,
a PR?
there's a PR that adds wildcard support.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Yuvraj sits next to me. Like,
yeah.
So.
All right. Apologies then for blustering.
Yeah, I think that PR provides a model for how we would want to do annotations. But the tricky thing is taints act much differently than either of those. So I think that's why the discussion is focusing on taints.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously,
If for context, like, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So for context, like when we added these things in place, like it was mostly security concerns, like to not make it configurable. So now that it is configurable, it's up to literally the person that's running this, sort of the administrator, to say, yes, absolutely, you can do whatever you want because I know what I'm doing, right? It's like for things like less of a security concern there, I guess, maybe. We'll need to think it through. But yeah, we'll figure it out. As long as copy knows what it owns, so we're fine.
Right. And I mean, I get it. And, you know, if there needs to be a differentiation between the things that CAPI owns and manages and the things that like it says, okay, the user's going to do, yeah, I mean, I need to read that other PR. But like, I'm just noticing that this is a problem coming up in multiple places now because we're dealing with this in the Carpenter community as well. Carpenter has made some choices around what labels and how it will propagate labels and what it will accept to recognize. And that's now causing, you know, it's causing toil for users of that who want to put whatever labels they want to or annotations or taints on the nodes in question. And we're running into this issue where it's like, now we're trying to replicate validation logic that's coming out of like the kubelet and the API server and whatnot. And we're trying to replicate it into these other things to like have this gating around what labels will go in and whatnot. And I just think my observation is it's creating more toil to like replicate those security boundaries in other places. Not that there isn't a good reason for doing it, because I think there is, but I'm just saying it, we should be aware of the toil that we're creating.
Right, that cross chatter can be dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Great discussion on that one. We're pretty much out of time at this point. So thankfully there are no provider updates or feature group updates. And yeah, I guess we'll see you all next week. And thanks everyone for coming on.
Thank you. Bye.